Let's just check, see if everything is connecting. Maybe, maybe not. Um, hmm. Here's the live stream, but yeah, let's see here. Didn't do the same as last time. I might have to post this out here. Huh, it worked last time, but now it's not picking it up. All right, let's see what we can do. No. Share. All right. Let's see what we can do. All right. Okay, so we will be talking today. I'll give it a minute here. I want to get some views, get some people coming in here, see what we can do. Yeah, hopefully we get some people watching. Unfortunately, it did not start in the broadcast like it's done before, which is bad. Means that X isn't always consistent as to how it does its broadcast streams. Hopefully, there's more of you on LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn or if you're on what is it, YouTube, if you communicate directly with your chat, it's linked to mine here in my streaming application. Unfortunately, on X and Twitch, that does not seem to work. So yeah, I'll try to pop over to X from time to time just to check and see how everything's going and see what happens here. I'm going to post a little message. All right, so that'll do us good. Oh, good. Got a chat message. Oh, that was for me. Oh, so hey, there we go. Okay, so your X, if you are watching on the X, um, I guess it does connect. So fine, I'll keep the chat window open here. You guys can ask questions as need be, and we'll go from there. So this week we talked about we were talking about the headless architecture, and that's what this is going to be about. This is going to be a review of the headless architecture, and that is still the case today. Basically, last time we talked about what headless components are, maybe why they're becoming popular, and those kind of things. I think from a standpoint of actually as a software developer, I think it's a lot like MVC or one of those other things where it kind of makes you think about things in a, divide things up and kind of divide and conquer almost and figure those kind of things out. Um, Basically, that's the hope is that, converting BSoft components to headless components. Number one, we'll have a more offerings. Basically, if people want to use our components but maybe they want to provide their own styles, then they'll be able to do that with the headless components. Whereas if they want to still use BSoft components, at least I feel that using the headless architecture, we will have a better chance at providing, a cleaner interface, more logical, putting places in the right place, all that kind of stuff. And that's what I've been doing. So I've created a headless architecture, a very basic one, mind you, but I'm also starting to implement the first. I'm trying to convert the first component, which is our checkbox component. Probably one of the most simplest components there. That's why I chose it, to kind of flush out maybe a little bit more what's going on with the headless architecture and what we, what features we need to add, things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and start the screen share here so you all can see. No, no, I'm going to do a window. And here we go. Since everything's still code right now, that's all I'll be sharing. So yeah, basically that's what you'll see is you'll see the code here. And yeah, like I said, so let's start with the headless architecture here. We're gonna just kind of start from scratch. So here's all the headless architecture work. If you've been on the Bsoft Collective um, community that was created, I think it was either early this week. I've been posting just about everything I've done to there, whether links to PRs or actual code examples, just copy and paste code examples, so that people can see what's going on. So up here's all the components we have currently, and I've actually separated it out here. I put a new headless folder, and so everything that's headless components have been into here. Besides the most obvious fact of separating things and making it simple, eventually once we actually go to once we actually get all the component library, the 1.0 version completed, this will also allow us to easily kind of just pull this into a separate repository and expose these components directly so that others can use the headless components if they wish to use those instead of having to use Bsoft components. So let's see here, what we got. So let's go ahead and let's get started. All right, let's take a look. So let's just pop this open. Nope, that's not the one I'm looking for. Let's start with the base component. So here we've got, why is it acting that way? Oh well, we'll make it work. Don't know if you guys have ever seen that before, where your software will suddenly start working different when it's being streamed. That should have just popped open and kept popping open. Anyways, basically, this is the headless base component. This is I realize it looks very simple, and that's really kind of the concept. Basically, this is the component that will be used to wrap the basic headless pieces together. We've got the use headless context here. Let's see if we can do that. There we go. All right. And so use headless context basically wraps our headless context, which is really quite simple. The way we're going to pass data, as it were, through through components that have multiple components, because components that have parent-child relationships in them. A good example would be the date time component. It has a bunch of parent-child relationships in them. The way you would normally do it inside of a component you would have props passing down to other props, passing down to other props, what's also known as prop drilling and things of that nature. Passing props down through a chain, possibly having even pieces of state that also get passed as props when it needs to, and that kind of stuff. But since these are headless components, you're not going to really have any interface. So it's the application of the component that's calling your component that you that ends up being what you need to pass around. So the concept that I liked with that, yeah. So basically, the concept is you would normally pass down through props and through prop drilling. Well, you can't really do that because each headless component that's in a series of components, for example, the date time component, each one has to have its own interface as well. So you can't expect the user is going to know that they need to pass the component props properly to the child components underneath. So what you need is you need the top headless component to find a way to pass those properties down to its child components so that when the top level component actually gets properties in and should pass it down to its subcomponents, it will do the work. Now, the way I've seen that done before is I've seen that done through context, and that's fine. Context is all well and good. I don't know how many people how much people know about the React context. It's really not meant to be used as like a data passing type system. The main reason for that is each time something changes in the context, every single component underneath that context gets re-rendered. So every time a prop would change at the top level, every single component underneath it, even the actual components that are implementing the headless components would also get a re-render as well. So you'd have a lot of re-renders happening when you do that. I do like the idea of the context, but I don't like what they were doing with it. What some of these other libraries have done with it. So in my idea, the idea is, well, let's use the context concept, but let's pass. I don't know how many of you've seen the P-React library, but they have some React pieces to the library as well, and one of them is something called a signal. Signals can be used to pass data, and only the component that is affected by that signal will actually be re-rendered. So what that means is if we have a top level component, instead of passing the props in our context, if we actually pass the different communication signals to the different components, then we could actually just pass data through there. So it's a one-time thing. In Preact, basically use sig the if you use the actual hook, the use signal hook, it will create a hook and it will use a use memo, which is set to no dependencies, which means it'll never be recreated. So basically, when you first create the actual signal, it will then get passed to all the other places and it will never be recreated again. So then if you take your top level headless component and you pass the data to where it needs to be, then it will only re-render the component that actually gets affected. That was the whole concept behind doing this. I know I'm not showing much, but that's why I'm talking about this, because you're not going to see it yet, because the first implementation I did, like I said, is a checkbox component. It's only a single level component, so I don't have anything really concrete to show. But hopefully, as we get to converting more complex components, I'll have some good examples that'll show you exactly why I did this. It might, and this is all subject to change. So far, in the implementation I've started, it's I've already found some things that I need to change. So that's kind of how this goes. So yeah, basically we made this generic here in the headless base. Um, I would have loved to have been able to put a type around this. I made a comment on X earlier this week about how TypeScript changed how the record string unknown used to work. Extends record string unknown used to work to where it would allow any interface to be passed in as its type, therefore making sure saying that it at least has to be an object interface. But now they do it to where if you say extends record string unknown, if it's an interface, it has to literally extend record string unknown, which of course is not something you want to do usually. So unfortunately, there is not another way. I've looked and looked and looked to allow to have TypeScript create uh, or to check your typings to say it must be an object type. So pretty much what you have to do is you have to just let it kind of go through and just let it happen as is. So if we go back to the headless base props, here we go. Here's what the headless base props looked like. So that's what this was right here. This right here is the headless base props. As you can see, I passed the type T into it. So yeah, the props basically are whatever the type is passed into it, and then the children render prop basically gets passed the props back. I'm not sure if that's going to be a proper way of doing it or not. Like I said, when I begin implementing the checkbox, you'll start to see where some of these things have started to look like they're going to need some changing. But that's how things go. Like I said, if you design things, I've posted this before. If you design things right, um, then all you can do is change things. And that's why software design and design patterns are very important. Anyways, let's continue on. Let's see here. We've got the okay, so we've got the whole headless base props concept here. Um, and so yeah, we've done that. We got the headless interfaces. Ah, yes. This is well, let's see here. Actually, I'll show that a little bit later. Here's the provider. For context, a lot of times I like to wrap them inside their own component. I like to wrap the context instead of just doing it like this, because sometimes what'll happen is you need to create like an object that'll end up getting passed to the provider. In this case, that's not the case, but it still just looks a little bit cleaner to say this is the headless provider. Here's a good example of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about having a provider. Let me see if this is the right one. Yeah, here's a provider for the entire library that passes certain settings to the entire library. And that's what I'm talking about why I do this, because we're wrapping this inside of an object here and then passing that object here instead of passing directly through. So that's what I mean when I say I like to have a provider. So basically, yes, this only wraps it and it kind of just does a straight pass through, but you never know when you're going to need to do something else. It's always better to initially at least to somewhat over design it and give you flexibility than to cut yourself off and have to go back and refactor after the fact. That's why I said good design helps along the way. So especially when you're starting out, at least I've got the option to come back to this and to do what I need to. So we've got that. We've got the provider. That's the props. Did I show this yet? The use. Yes, I did. I think I did show this. The use headless context. Yes. So now we are into the headless base component. Let's see if we got the headless base props. So yeah, this is the headless base component props. And so yeah, so we're passing in the actual type to it. The props are basically typed with the type. So whatever component we are passing in, we whatever type we pass in here, that's the props it's going to expect, and that's also the props it's going to kick back to us as the children as the child render function. Signal name and on signal retrieved. Basically, that's the whole signal concept I was telling you about, where basically what the top level headless component will do is create an array of key value pairs of the signals by name that are going to get passed throughout the entire context. So basically, when the component is first created, when the headless component is first created, it will go in, it'll create an object that has all the different signals that are needed by the different pieces of the different sub components in the headless component. We'll pass those down to it, and then it will know when certain things change excuse me, where that data will end up going. So what this allows us to do is if we pass a signal name into our headless component, it will actually fire an on signal retrieved when that signal is created. So basically what you'll find here, if we go back to the signal base component, is right there. So when the context fires, if there's a signal name and that signal and the context has that signal name and on signal retrieved is actually passed in, is actually set to something, then we fire on signal retrieved with that with the signal that came in the context. So now the uh, the actual headless component itself has the signal that it can use to retrieve data. So that's where I'm talking about trying to create this architecture that kind of wraps things for us and provides things that we can use to pull back data and all that. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to go through signals, like I said. Hopefully by next time I've done a component that actually has to use a signal, because signals are a really cool thing. If none of you have used it before, go to Preact's site, read through their signal stuff. It is probably one of the coolest concepts you've ever seen. It it's really simple. If you've ever gone through the code, I think the entire code for the signals a couple hundred lines for all the signal stuff. It's really good. Works relatively well. There is a slight bug out there. But I know they're on it. It has to do with lazy loaded components. Um, but I did see that someone grabbed that and hopefully is on that soon. but we're in the middle of the development of this. I'm sure it'll be fixed by that time. That's why I like the signal concept and then sticking with it. I think I've gone through the entire headless architecture here. So this is the checkbox component here. We'll go ahead and we'll leave it up. We'll leave it. So we will start with the. Actually, let's go ahead. Ooh, no, I've already taken the code out of there. So we will go with the headless checkbox component. So this is what I started working on today. So basically what I did is I started pulling apart the pieces of the checkbox component. I started taking things out. These are the pieces, at least within the headless component, that we need of the props. Just checked, partial, and the child render prop. So basically, we created the state within here. This is my own state provider. It's called use state ref initial. Basically, what the concept of this is it tells us if the state is in its initial state or has it been changed. You'll see why that's important here in a couple of in just a minute. This is another hook that I've written. You can find these two hooks I've mentioned. You can find that in the BSoft component or BSoft common library at bsoft/common. That's the name of the actual library, and it is out there on npm as well. And you can actually read through the code on GitHub. At our organization. Anyways, use property changed. What this does is basically you pass. It could be more. It doesn't have to be properties, but in this case, the plan would be it's used on properties and it checks to see when they're changed. It's really quite simple. Basically, it just records the last value of a property, even if it's an object, even if it's whatever. It uses a deep equals. It uses the fast deep equals library to do comparisons to determine when the property actually has changed or not. And so basically, if the property is changed, what you end up getting is let's see if this will actually show it to me. No, of course not. Let's see if I can go into it through here. There we go. And then we get the property changed return. There we are. So basically you get, has it changed? Here's the previous value. So you already have the current value. You can check the current value of the property. So this will now show you the previous value and whether or not the value has changed. So that also will come into play here very soon. Now with our checkbox, hang on. With our checkbox, um, we needed. Well, I wanted to provide the ability to have checkboxes that were partially checked. You'd be surprised how often that comes in. That actually came into play at my full time job. So this was developed because of my full time job. And specifically developed to have a partial checking capabilities because that's what we needed. We needed the ability to. I've been writing a select all feature over there in our drop down, and we need the ability to have partially selected, fully selected. If it's partially selected, be able to click it and then be able to click the partially selected item and have it go back to fully selected, and all that kind of stuff. The partial selected is usually something that's just set, but it's not something that can be achieved by clicking. So basically, if you just click the checkbox, it works like a normal checkbox, checked, unchecked, back and forth. But you can programmatically set it to partially checked. That's where this use effect comes in here. So yeah, we got checked, partial. Basically, this is where the whole check state concept comes in. So if we hit this and we're in the initial check state, then basically we know that we can set the partial check to whatever's happening. If partial is set, and if it's set, and in this case it has to be set to true because it is strictly a boolean. So if it's true, we set it to true. If it's not true, then we set check to. Oh, sorry, this is the check property. Then it's set to whatever checked is. So if partial is set, checked has to be true. So that's basically what this is saying. That's how the checkbox works under the hood. So if it's partially checked, it still reports out when it throws out the on change event that it is checked, and then the partial tells it, is it partially checked or is it fully checked. So that's the way this works. So then partial returns whatever it is. So if basically the property the partial property was passed, then what will happen is it will set check to true by default. Now, if we're not in the initial, if basically this is not the initial time, in other words, the first time that the state is set, then that means the state has actually been changed. So once it's actually been changed, which is what this guy here does. So when you make the call to this set here, the first time you actually set it, initial is then false, and then it'll fall down into here, and then that gives us this. So then we have to figure out how we have to do this, because you've got to realize we have the ability to have properties set, we have the ability to have state set. So you know, if we click something on the checkbox, it's the state that's updating. But if we're setting an initial value of checked, or if we're setting the partial value to true, then it will fire through here. So this is what we have. So that's how we have to do this. That's why we have the whole. This is the change property concept again, and then we actually can take the value checked, value partial. So basically, if what both of these are saying is, if the check property is not changed, then use whatever the current state value is. If it is changed, then go ahead and take whatever the property is. So basically, if the property's changed, use the property. If not, use the state. That's basically what that's saying. And then we just set the check state and let the component update. Um, Set partially checked, set checked. These are the refs, the forward refs in React here. Uh, Pretty basic. They work almost the same as setting a property, but setting it through the ref, I like to provide multiple ways for people to do things. Sometimes it's simpler just to set the ref and say, set it to partially checked, set it to checked. But they work the same way. Basically, if it's set to checked, then partial is automatically set to false, because if you're saying it's checked, then by default it's not partially checked. But if we're partially checked, then we go through the whole process again. If it's partially checked, if we're setting it to true, if partially checked, then we have to make sure that checked is set to true as well. If not, then you go to the whole, whatever the state is, blah, 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 that kind of thing. Set the check state and fires out. This is pretty much all. I'm pretty sure this is about as close as we're going to need for the headless checkbox. I got a feeling, like I said, that the actual child property here, the children property here, might end up changing. Let's go into actually the props itself as well here. There we are. We'll just pop into there, and so here's what the state props look like. And this is where I showed this earlier. I said I'd come back to this. So here's our headless check component props, check partial, label location, plus we have this form input control. Uh, eh, Fine, we'll jump into it. Form control interface, or the form input control, is basically this is for every form control that's going to be in BSoft components. Every form control has certain properties that are used. They have a label, a name, a value, read only, placeholder, all that kind of stuff. On focus, on blur. All these are basic things that you'll find in any form control. So I'm putting them in here so that they can be used and be set. You'll The places where I use them at, this is all of them are optional here. I've also written, it's not here, but I've written something that can make them required. So basically, they're set optional, but on certain components where, let's say, the name is required, I've written an actual interface. It's in BSoft Common, that can say, okay, for these properties, make these properties required, so that therefore then the component can actually require them. So let's see, it's bounced back. Let's see here, the checkbox change event, huh? Yeah, okay. That's going to need to be converted. That should probably be the headless checkbox change event. But yeah, basically that's all it is. This is the change event for the checkbox change event. Oh, it is headless. I just didn't change the name. So I did move it. So yeah, basically name, value checked, and original event. So this is the actual event, so that you can, and this is the way all of our components will work. It will also send back the actual original event plus our own. We'll pull out the pieces we feel are important, but we'll give you the event back so that you can do whatever you need to if you want to pull out other pieces from the actual event, from the actual underlying component. Um, and then this is the thing I landed on and said I'd come back to. So basically, I think I'm going to change this concept, but this is how, for the headless component, I was creating the children component. I was creating it with basically passing all the props back in the child render component. The reason I think that's wrong is because I've got a feeling, and you'll see this here in just a minute when I jump to the actual checkbox component. I've got a feeling that things like this, the check state, and possibly maybe a property or two or something like that, might end up needing to be passed along in the child render prop. Right now, we're quite literally just taking the headless base, which, as you saw, has a child render prop in and of itself, and just passing the children directly to it. Both of these would need to be changed if I figure out that this is wrong. But like I said, that's why you start off with something simple and then you move on from there. Let me just take a look. Okay. Nope. All right. So now we'll go actually to the checkbox component. Now this is going to look picked apart because that's exactly where I ended up leaving it. As you can see, there's lots of red everywhere and all that because before I quit for the afternoon, before I had dinner, I actually just started ripping pieces out. And I think I got most of the pieces over to the headless component, but this is now the torn apart checkbox component. So here's why I think that we are going to need to change things because we've got the checked state in here that's used inside of here. Here's how you would use a headless component. Basically, you take the headless component, you pass the props to it, and it returns the child render function. This is the child render function that then has the form input control with the checkbox change event. That's what it's actually passing us back, which is odd because I would think it would have something else. So that's incorrect as well. Like I said, work in progress. I feel that work in progress is more fun to look at from a standpoint because uh, perfect polished things, makes it look like people just magically somehow create this perfect code. But code is a long and arduous process, and I've only got about 10 hours a week to actually work on this. So unfortunately, I don't have 40 hours a week that I can devote to this and get something fully working throughout the week. But we can kind of look at what the old checkbox. This is the markup for the old checkbox, and I haven't even gone through it at all. So basically, what we did is this is I'm using actual SVGs to do the check and the partial check. So the partial check is just basically a line. The checkbox is an actual checkbox. There's actually let's see here. Is it over here? There's this. This is part of it. I am using Tailwind, so you'll notice I do some apply, animate bounce and stuff like this. This is the Tailwind animate bounce. So when the checkbox is checked, it kind of does this little bounce animation at the very end. You can turn it off. Any of the animations in any of our libraries can be turned off. They can be turned off directly within the component, or that actual context I showed you, that BSoft context has an option in there to just turn off all animations component wide. So we try to be as flexible as we can, give you the ability to turn it off at a specific component level, but also give you the ability to just turn it off across the board. The property takes precedent. So if you set it to turn off across the board, but you turn on one, the component will take the property over the context. So context is what's applied across the board. Individual property will override it. Nothing here really. Unfortunately, since this is not actually building, I can't run Storybook and show you how this looks. So basically, yeah, here's this. Uh, we'll go through this and kind of just do a real quick session on how you could create your own custom text boxes. Basically, this wraps. We've got a simple div that wraps here. This is where the label location concept is coming into play here. If you say you want the label location on the left, and the label ends up rendering over here. This label is our own custom label. It's got a couple of features in there. One of them being setting the HTML4, which I'm not sure if everyone knows what HTML4 is for. But if you look on labels, you can say for, and you can pass the ID of an input, and clicking on the label will then cause the actual item itself to be checked, and that's what we're using here. So even though this is the actual rendered SVG that you will actually see in the component, behind the scenes we actually have a hidden input component, and I don't know if it shows it's hidden. The inner checkbox styles here. Um, they show it's actually not hidden. I use appearance none is what I do. So I use appearance none. That's one of the newer appearance settings to turn it off. So basically, it just doesn't show. It's physically sitting there in the HTML. It's physically rendered. when this is clicked, or this down here if you have it on the right. Actually, if for the checkbox, right is the default because usually you would have the the label to the right of the checkbox. So when you click on here, what actually happens is it causes the input to get checked. The on change fires, which then actually sets the state to then cause the render of the SVG to change. So either it's checked, unchecked, or partially checked. So unchecked, basically, neither of these are shown. So that's pretty much how that works there. Um, that's a lot of really custom components, a lot of really nice looking components that have a lot of nice look and feel to them. Do a lot of the same things. I do the same in the radio buttons. I do stuff like that. I If you're going to write your own components, I think you ought to give the users something for it. If you're just giving them the plain HTML, then they can just do it themselves. So the concept is to give them something that's a little bit nicer than what they're going to see by a simple checkbox component, by a simple radio button component. Give them something with a little bit of animation. Give them something that looks nice. So wrapping it inside of its own div, hiding the input, still allowing it to respond to clicks like it normally would, but then having the SVG render the actual checkbox itself. That's all the stuff that makes things look nice, that makes them work and makes them really functional. This is a lot of my I use CX's class names. If any of you wants to know, it's a nice little library that allows you to pass conditionally set certain things within classes. So if it's right, we want to do this. If the label location is left, we want to do that. Um, right, and so it turns pieces of CSS on and off, allows you to pass in your own type stuff. Um, here's something that I'm trying to do in the library is trying to encapsulate common functionality through hooks. So use focus ring style. It's pretty basic, but what we're doing is basically we're allowing the whole focus ring concept to be applied to any component and trying to build it so that depending on what you're trying to do, it can actually work for everything. And this way, we don't have a lot of extra code. So if I start to see that I'm seeing a lot of repeat code in there, what I'll try to do is I'll try to put it into a hook, throw it up into my common hooks here, and throw that in there. Here's some style hooks. So there's my style hooks. This is the use animation thing I was telling you about. That's a hook to determine how to use, because I noticed inside I have two different components that provide animation. So I noticed the code was getting very simple or similar. So I went ahead and just threw it into a hook and just went ahead and let that do it there. So that's the way you need to think when you're developing. As I start to see things that are repeated, start to think about how to help with the whole repeated concept. Start to make it simpler for yourself down the road. Don't give yourself more work. I've seen so many developers go down this path of giving themselves far too much work to do. uh, Boy, this is a lie. This is a while ago. This is probably close to about 10 years ago. I was working at a financial firm, and I was working with a guy, and I told him, he had a lot of things he had to get done, but it was object oriented. And so I told him, look, if you build a base concept, if you just start with this base concept, and you build, a base component, some base functionality, and you write most of it in there, then, because he had to build like 5 or 6 things, but they were all extremely similar. As a matter of fact, most of them probably shared 60, 70% of the code, and he was going to just be rewriting code over and over and over again. And he's like, I can't do that. And I said, oh, think that way. You need to start thinking about how to make things um, simpler, how to save yourself uh, work. As you see a place where you can take a piece of code and put it somewhere else and prepare it for reuse, and then the next time you come around, instead of sit there and copy and paste, which in this case, I mean, copy and we've there's been a lot of back and forth on X recently of copy and paste stuff. um Copy and paste is fine, but within your code base, it's a bad, bad, bad idea. I would not say copy and paste. I would say leave copy and paste alone when you're when you're copying and pasting between components or between classes or between whatever you're working on. Um, Move it into its own class, its own component, its own whatever. Move that in there. That was the concept with the headless base component. Um, let's not sit here and just have to repeat that code over and over and over again. No, no, no. Let's build a component that, as I start to see more things that can be reused, as I start to see more things that need to go that are going to be the same across the board, well, they go into the headless base component. So what I showed you today is very simple because I didn't want to spend my whole week focusing on uh, this extreme architecture and all this kind of stuff, and then find out that I've just wasted a lot of time because I need to do this, I need to do that. Best thing to do is get something simple out, something that, like I said, if it's designed right, it makes it easy to modify, and that's what I've done. I've focused more on the design than I've worried about getting the code perfect. So get the design right, get it out there, start working with it, and then you'll perfect it as you go along. That's what you should. That should be your goal. That should be your aim in everything you do, is try to get the best design possible. And this is where design patterns come into play. Someone made a post not long ago about how important are design patterns. I think they're very important. Design patterns play a big part in everything. Even if you're doing component based development like React, understanding design patterns can still come into play in there. Even just having the mindset, even if you don't use all of those design patterns, having the mindset of understanding that design is very important is probably one of the best things you can do. Um, really, truly, it is. I'm going to stop sharing because I really don't have any extra code to show anymore. We will just, yep, there we go. Okay, we'll just go back to full screen here, and you can look at my ugly mug. So, yeah, design patterns I think are very important. They apply across the board. The main the main design patterns that are out there are referred to as the Gang of Four design patterns. If you look up on any decent search engine, it'll probably autocomplete it for you. There's a lot of good sites out there. The one that I've used the most, now I used to be a .NET developer, was called dofactory.com. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's what it's called, dofactory.com. They have some good examples, and if you're like a C sharp developer, or if at least if you understand C like language, it would give you a pretty basic concept as to how it works. They come with really nice graphs, and they'll show you how they work together. And basically, what most design patterns come down to is what's referred to as interface based design. Interface based design, that's what they say. You should always code to an interface, not an implementation. So concrete implementations come from interfaces. You code to interfaces, and then you can provide concrete implementations, and that's where things like dependency injection and all that kind of stuff comes into play. And so you have an interface, you can inject a dependency. And here's what I'm talking about, where I'm saying if you get the design right, you don't have to worry about the implementation. So if you get the design right, then if you find that there's something wrong with the concrete implementation you have, you can either change that concrete implementation, or you can just pass a new one. You can create a new one. If the old one has to be completely restructured, but you don't want to restructure that one, you can create a new one and then change the dependency injection to inject it in there. Now, dependency injection has almost nothing to do with React, but there are some frameworks that do have dependency injection, one of those being Angular. So that's why I bring up the dependency injection, because it can happen. In Angular, you can have a service, and you can have a service that has a certain definition, and then in different parts of the application, you can have different implementations of that same service. So yeah, it's really quite interesting. So as much as I like React, and as much as I think React is clean and efficient and all that, Angular's got some really cool stuff in it too. It really has some really amazing stuff. Now I haven't been in it for over 3 years, so I don't know where it's gone since then. But it's a pretty interesting concept, and understanding those concepts will help you in a lot of things you do. Um, yeah, I think that's pretty much all I got for today. I wish more of the team could have been here today. I was hoping I would at least get Vishnal to show up. He said he might. We've got, with myself, we've got 4 people working right now, which is really good. Cliv, who was here last time for interview, that were on the last live stream, he was not able to make it today. Um, Salem, he joined as well. I'm hoping I'm saying his name right. I haven't actually heard him say his name, but that's how it's spelled. He was traveling today during this time, so he could not show up. So I'm hoping next time maybe we have more of the team. Maybe we have at least a meet and greet. And next time, I'm planning on actually having the checkbox completely wrapped up, and I'll probably be able to show you the changes that I did to the headless framework. I have a feeling, like I said, I'm going to need to change that because I have a feeling the props can't just be a direct pass through, but they're going to need to be able to actually pass items like state related items that are going within the component that are going to be able to pass through the render props as well. So I'm probably gonna have to do some restructuring now that because you saw that red there. As I start to restructure the checkbox component, I'm gonna need to do some conceptual restructuring and figure out where I'm gonna go from there. I'm gonna go ahead and end this now, but before all of you go, it'd be really nice if you want to. I'm going to have a Q&A session here in about 15 minutes. It'll be kind of a ask the senior dev anything kind of thing, tech related, please. Let's keep it tech related. Um, and I will attempt to answer. I don't know absolutely everything, but 23 years experience has taught me a lot. Um, I've learned a lot of languages. I know a lot of different kinds of things, and I truly am trying to help out anyone and anyone that's direct messaged me. I hope they can tell you that I've done my best to answer their questions and to give them the help that they need. And that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to help out, trying to like everyone else, trying to promote the things that I'm doing so people can know what I'm doing because it really doesn't make a lot of point me doing all this work. No one sees it. so so I'm gonna go ahead, like I said, and end it there. And hopefully you all had you know you got something from this. You learned something from this. If you have questions about what I'm doing, please you can hit me up on X. You can hit me up on LinkedIn. I'd love it if you subscribe to YouTube or Twitch if you wanna if you use one of those services. I'm out there as well. Um, yeah, I'm just trying to push hard, promote, and do everything I can to get the work that we're going to be really pushing forward on here noticed by everyone. So I'm glad I see there's some views here, so I'm really glad that there's some people that have viewed this, and I'm hoping more people see it in the replay. Um, that's going to be it. I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm going to get ready for the Q&A session here. So hopefully we'll see as many.